On Thanksgiving, the older sister chased her younger sister's family away. In Raleigh, Allison Harper was seething as she drove to her sister Emily's lavish Thanksgiving dinner in Charlotte. But Emily's latest criticism cut deep. Come to Thanksgiving, Allie, but leave your husband Mike and the kids, they're lowlifes. Those words ignited Allison's rage. She drove to Charlotte, not to submit, but to retaliate. My sister's betrayal, Thanksgiving revenge. The story begins. Everyone, please subscribe to my Sweet Revenge YouTube channel. In the quiet suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina, where oak trees draped their gnarled branches over tidy lawns and the air carried the faint hum of cicadas, Allison Harper stood in her cramped kitchen, her hands trembling as she stirred a pot of cranberry sauce. The sharp tang of berries mingled with the warm aroma of sage and roasting turkey. But the scents did little to soothe the storm raging in her chest. Her heart thudded with a bitter cocktail of resentment and betrayal, each beat a reminder of the phone call that had shattered her fragile peace just hours ago. Allison, at 42, was the kind of woman who wore her strength quietly, her chestnut hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her hazel eyes carrying the weight of years spent putting others first. For 15 years, she had been the invisible scaffolding holding up her younger sister Emily's glittering life. Emily, 38, lived in a world of polished excess in Charlotte, a mansion with marble countertops, a wardrobe of silk dresses, and an Instagram feed that screamed wealth, candlelit dinners in Paris, yacht parties in Miami, champagne flutes glinting under chandeliers. Meanwhile, Allison's life in Raleigh was a study in sacrifice. Her husband, Mike, a high school history teacher with a gentle smile and calloused hands, brought home a modest salary. Their two children, 12-year-old Lily with her freckled nose and 9-year-old Ethan with his boundless curiosity, filled their small ranch-style home with laughter but not luxury. Allison's fingers tightened around the wooden spoon as she replayed Emily's voice in her mind, each word a shard of glass. Allison, come to Thanksgiving in Charlotte, Emily had said, her tone dripping with condescension. But, please, don't bring Mike and the kids. They're, well, you know, a bit low class. They're not really my level. The words had landed like a slap, leaving Allison speechless on the other end of the line. Low class? Her family, who had scrimped and saved to keep their heads above water. Mike, who stayed up late grading papers to afford Ethan's soccer cleats. Lily, who'd given up her dream of dance lessons so Allison could send another check to Emily. The audacity burned in Allison's throat, a fire she couldn't swallow. For years, Allison had been Emily's lifeline. When Emily's boutique in Charlotte teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, Allison sent $30, dipping into her retirement savings. When their mother's cancer treatments drained the family's resources, Emily had pleaded poverty, and Allison covered $50 in medical bills, skipping her own family's vacation to the Outer Banks. When Emily needed a $20 trip to Paris to clear her head after a breakup, Allison wired the money, ignoring Mike's worried glance as their savings account dwindled. Over 15 years, Allison had funneled nearly $200 to Emily, money scraped from overtime shifts at her accounting firm, from nights spent poring over budgets, from denying herself the small joys Emily flaunted without a second thought. Mom, you okay? Lily's voice broke through Allison's haze. She stood in the kitchen doorway, her brown eyes wide with concern, holding a half-finished drawing of a turkey. Ethan peeked out from behind her, clutching a toy spaceship. Allison forced a smile, her lips tight. I'm fine, sweetie, just thinking about Thanksgiving. Her voice cracked, and she turned back to the stove, blinking away the sting in her eyes. She couldn't tell them what Emily had said, not yet. The shame of it, the betrayal, was too raw. Mike appeared behind the kids, his flannel shirt rumpled from a day of yard work. Smells amazing in here, he said, his voice warm but cautious as he studied her face. Everything all right, Allie? She wanted to tell him, to spill the venom Emily had spewed, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded, her jaw tight. Just a long day, she lied, stirring the sauce with more force than necessary. The spoon scraped the pot's bottom, a grating sound that mirrored her fraying nerves. That night, after the kids were asleep, Allison sat at the kitchen table, a glass of cheap Merlot untouched in front of her. The house was silent except for the faint tick of the clock above the sink. She stared at her phone. Emily's contact photo, a selfie from some rooftop bar, mocking her from the screen. Allison's mind churned with memories. Emily's tearful calls about crises. Her vague promises to pay it back someday. Her breezy thank yous that never felt genuine. And now this, calling Allison's family low class. Dismissing the people who'd given her everything. Her gaze drifted to a shoebox tucked under the table, where she kept her financial records. Inside were years of bank statements, wire transfer receipts, a ledger of every dollar she'd sent Emily. She pulled it out, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. Each entry was a wound. $5 for Emily's car payment. $10 for her boutique's rent. $15 for consulting fees Allison knew were nonsense. The numbers blurred as tears welled up. But they didn't fall. Instead, something hardened inside her, a resolve as cold and sharp as a blade. "I'm done," she whispered to the empty room, her voice barely audible but heavy with conviction. She wouldn't just go to Emily's Thanksgiving dinner. She'd bring the truth with her. Emily wanted to play the Queen of Charlotte? Fine. Allison would show her exactly who'd built her throne. She stood, her chair scraping against the linoleum, and grabbed a folder from the shelf. As she began organizing the documents, each one a piece of her sacrifice, she felt a spark ignite in her chest. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming her dignity. Thanksgiving in Charlotte would be a reckoning, and Allison was ready to set the table. The 3-hour drive from Raleigh to Charlotte was a gauntlet of Allison Harper's churning emotions. The rolling hills of North Carolina blurring past her windshield like a watercolor painting smeared by rage. Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Her jaw clenched so tightly her teeth ached. In the passenger seat of her weathered Honda Accord sat a manila folder. Its edges worn but its contents explosive, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, a ledger of every dollar she'd poured into her sister Emily's lavish life over 15 years. Each document was a brick in the wall of resentment Allison had carried. And today, she would tear that wall down. Emily's words from their phone call echoed in Allison's mind. Each syllable a fresh wound. "Don't bring Mike and the kids. They're low class, not really my level." The condescension had sliced through Allison's heart, but now it fueled her. A molten core of determination. She wasn't just driving to a Thanksgiving dinner in Charlotte, she was marching into battle. Armed with the truth and ready to detonate. As she pulled into the manicured streets of Myers Park, Charlotte's most affluent neighborhood, Allison's stomach twisted. Emily's mansion loomed ahead. A white-columned monolith with ivy creeping up its facade. Its windows glowing with the warm light of wealth. The driveway was lined with sleek cars, a Mercedes, a Tesla, a Bentley. Allison's Honda looked like a trespasser. Its faded blue paint and dented fender a stark contrast to the opulence. She parked, grabbed her folder, and took a deep breath, her heart hammering like a war drum. "You've got this," she muttered to herself, her voice low but fierce. The cold November air bit at her cheeks as she stepped out. Her sensible black dress and worn flats a quiet rebellion against Emily's world of excess. Inside, the mansion was a cathedral of extravagance. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across the foyer, and the dining room table gleamed with gold-rimmed plates and polished silver. The air smelled of rosemary and wealth, undercut by the faint clink of champagne glasses. Emily's guests were a parade of Charlotte's elite. A real estate mogul with a Rolex glinting on his wrist. A local news anchor in a tailored blazer. A tech entrepreneur whose laugh boomed with self-assurance. Emily floated among them, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her emerald silk dress catching the light as she moved. She was the queen of this stage, her smile a carefully rehearsed performance. When Emily spotted Allison at the threshold, her eyes flickered with something, surprise, annoyance, or perhaps unease, before she plastered on a smile and glided over. "Allie," she chirped, leaning in for an air kiss that grazed Allison's cheek like a cold breeze. "So glad you could make it. Where's everyone else?" Her tone was syrupy, but the question carried a barb, a reminder of her cruel directive. Allison's lips curled into a tight smile, her hazel eyes glinting with barely concealed fire. She clutched the folder under her arm, its weight grounding her. "Oh, you know, Emily," she said, her voice steady but laced with venom. "They're not your level, right? I wouldn't want to embarrass you." The words dripped with sarcasm, and Emily's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing for a split second before she recovered. "Don't be silly," Emily said, her laugh high and forced, loud enough to draw glances from the guests. "Come, sit, you're just in time for the appetizers." She ushered Allison to a seat near the end of the table, as if tucking her out of sight, and returned to her role as hostess, her voice ringing with false warmth as she toasted family and gratitude. Allison sat, her pulse pounding in her ears, the folder resting on her lap like a loaded gun. The table buzzed with chatter, stock portfolios, yacht clubs, the latest gala in uptown Charlotte. She felt like an outsider in this glittering world, her hands calloused from years of overtime, her dress bought on clearance at Target. But the folder in her lap was her power, her proof, her weapon. She sipped her water, her eyes scanning the room, waiting for the perfect moment. It came halfway through the main course, as the scent of roasted turkey and truffle mashed potatoes filled the air. Emily, emboldened by her third glass of Pinot Grigio, leaned across the table, her voice carrying over the clatter of cutlery. "Allison, you really should think about moving to Charlotte," she said, her tone dripping with pity. "Raleigh's so quaint. That little life of yours, it's sweet. But you could do so much better." The words landed like a match in gasoline. The room went quiet, forks pausing mid-air, eyes darting between the sisters. Allison's heart roared, a tidal wave of fury and hurt crashing through her. She stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that cut through the silence like a gunshot. Her hands trembled as she opened the folder, but her voice was steady, a blade honed by years of sacrifice. "Let's talk about my little life, Emily," she said, her words ringing with a quiet ferocity that made the guests shift in their seats. "Because for 15 years, I've been the one propping up your big one." Emily's face froze, her wineglass hovering near her lips. "Allie, what are you?" she started. But Allison cut her off, slamming the folder onto the table with a thud that echoed like a gavel. "Don't," Allison snapped, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to play innocent. Not today." She turned to the guests, her voice rising, each word a release of the pain she'd buried for years. "You all see this house, these clothes, this life? You think Emily built it? Think again. I did. Every penny of it." The real estate mogul coughed awkwardly. The news anchor's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up, and the tech entrepreneur leaned forward, sensing a spectacle. Emily's face flushed crimson, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Allison, stop it," she hissed, her voice low but desperate. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Embarrassing myself?" Allison laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made the chandelier seem to dim. "No, Emily, you embarrassed yourself when you called my family low class. My husband, who works harder than anyone in this room. My kids, who are kinder than you'll ever be. You don't get to look down on them, not when you've been living on my dime." She opened the folder, pulling out the first document, a bank statement from 2010, and held it up for all to see. "This," she said, her voice trembling with righteous anger, "is the $30 I sent when your boutique was struggling. Money I took from my retirement fund. Money my family needed." She tossed it onto the table, the paper landing like a gauntlet thrown. Emily's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting to her guests as if begging for rescue. But Allison wasn't done. The showdown had just begun, and she was ready to lay every card on the table. The dining room in Emily's Myers Park mansion was a frozen tableau, the air thick with the scent of truffle mashed potatoes and the weight of Allison Harper's words. The gold-rimmed plates gleamed under the chandelier's light, but the glow couldn't mask the tension that crackled like static. Allison stood at the end of the table, her manila folder open, a bank statement clutched in her trembling hand. Her hazel eyes blazed with a fury that had been smoldering for 15 years, now erupting into a wildfire. The guests, Charlotte's elite, with their tailored suits and practiced smiles, sat rigid, their forks abandoned, their eyes darting between Allison and her sister Emily, whose porcelain-perfect facade was crumbling. Allison's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unyielding. "This," she said, holding up the bank statement, its numbers stark against the creamy paper, "is the $30 I sent you in 2010. Emily, when your boutique was weeks from closing. Money I pulled from my retirement fund. Money my kids went without because you said you had nothing." She flung the paper onto the table, where it landed among the crystal wineglasses. A silent accusation. Emily's face drained of color, her emerald silk dress suddenly seeming too tight, too bright, a costume for a role she could no longer play. "Allie, please," she stammered, her voice a fragile thread, her blue eyes wide with panic. "This isn't the place. You're making a scene." "A scene?" Allison's laugh was a jagged edge, raw and unapologetic, echoing off the polished hardwood floor. You made this scene, Emily, when you called my family low class. My husband, who grades papers until midnight to pay our bills. My daughter, who gave up dance lessons so I could bail you out. My son, who wears hand-me-downs because I was too busy funding your Paris trips. Her voice rose, each word a hammer striking the fragile glass of Emily's world. She pulled another document from the folder, a wire transfer receipt from 2015, and slammed it down. The sound sharp enough to make the real estate mogul flinch. This is the $50 for Mom's cancer treatments, Allison said, her voice trembling not with fear but with righteous rage. You told me you were tapped out. Emily, tapped out, while you were posting photos from that yacht in Miami. I worked double shifts for a year to cover that. A year. The news anchor, her red lipstick stark against her paling face, leaned back in her chair, her eyes flicking to Emily as if seeing her for the first time. The tech entrepreneur, his earlier bravado gone, stared at the documents piling up on the table. The real estate mogul cleared his throat, his Rolex catching the light as he shifted uncomfortably. But no one spoke. The room belonged to Allison now. Emily's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her voice rising in desperation. You're twisting everything, Allie. I never asked you to do all that. You offered, you wanted to help. Wanted to help? Allison's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a dangerous low, each word dripping with venom. You manipulated me, Emily. Every tearful phone call, every, oh, I'm in trouble, sob story. You knew I'd step in because I always did. Because I'm your sister. Because I loved you. Her voice cracked on the last word. And for a moment, the room saw not the avenging warrior but the wounded sister. Her pain laid bare. She reached into the folder again, pulling out a ledger, its pages worn from years of meticulous entries. This, she said, her voice steadying, is every dollar I've sent you. $200 over 15 years. $20 for your emergency Paris trip. $15 for your car payment. $10 for your boutique's rent when you forgot to pay it. I kept track, Emily, every single penny. She tossed the ledger onto the table, its pages fanning out like a deck of cards, each entry a testament to her sacrifice. The guests were statues, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow, the news anchor's wineglass tipped slightly in her hand, a drop of Pinot Grigio staining the tablecloth. The tech entrepreneur muttered something under his breath. But Allison didn't care. She was a force now. Unstoppable, her heart pounding with the exhilaration of truth. Emily's voice broke through, shrill and frantic. You're lying. You're trying to ruin me. She stood, her chair scraping back, her hands flailing as if she could push the accusations away. These people don't need to hear your sob story. Allison, you're just jealous. You've always been jealous of my life. Jealous? Allison's voice was a whip, cracking through the room. Of what, Emily? This house? These clothes? This lie you've built on my back? I'm done carrying you. She pulled out the final document, a bank statement showing her savings account. Nearly empty, the numbers a stark contrast to Emily's opulence. She held it up, her hand steady now, her eyes locked on her sister's. This is what's left of me after you. Nothing. And you have the nerve to call my family not your level? Emily's mouth opened, but no words came. Her guests stared, their silence louder than any protest. The real estate mogul looked away, his jaw tight. The news anchor set her glass down, her eyes cold. Emily's empire of charm was crumbling, and Allison was the earthquake. I'm done, Allison said, her voice quiet now, but heavy with finality. You're cut off, Emily. No more money, no more lies. Happy Thanksgiving. She closed the folder with a snap, turned, and walked toward the door, her steps steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The cold November air hit her face as she stepped into the driveway. The weight of the folder gone, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Behind her, Emily's voice rose, shrill and desperate, calling after her. Allie, wait, you can't do this. But Allison didn't turn back. The mansion's lights faded as she reached her car, the Honda's familiar creak a comfort as she slid inside. She gripped the steering wheel, her breath coming in sharp gasps, a mix of triumph and grief washing over her. The truth was out, and it had set her free, but it had also severed the last thread tying her to her sister. As she pulled out of the driveway, the stars above Charlotte glittered coldly, indifferent to the wreckage she'd left behind. Allison didn't know what came next. The drive back to Raleigh from Charlotte was a quiet unraveling. The dark ribbon of I-85 stretching before Allison Harper like a path to salvation. The November night pressed against her Honda Accord's windows. The stars above North Carolina sharp and unyielding, mirroring the clarity that had settled in her chest. Her hands, still trembling from the showdown at Emily's mansion, gripped the steering wheel, but the folder of damning documents was gone, left on Emily's gold-rimmed table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Allison's heart raced, not with fear but with a strange, exhilarating freedom. For the first time in 15 years, she felt unburdened, as if the weight of her sister's manipulation had been burned away in the fire of her own truth. The hum of the car's engine was her only companion as she replayed the scene in her mind. Emily's pale face. Her guest's stunned silence. The ledger of sacrifices splayed across the table like a confession. "You're cut off," she'd said, and those words echoed now. A mantra of liberation, but beneath the triumph, a dull ache pulsed. Grief for the sister she'd once loved. For the family they might have been. Allison's hazel eyes stung with unshed tears. But she blinked them back, focusing on the road ahead. Raleigh, her home, her real family, was waiting. When she pulled into the driveway of her modest ranch-style house, the porch light glowed like a beacon. The oak trees in the yard cast long shadows, and the faint scent of wood smoke lingered in the air, a reminder of the life she'd built with Mike, Lily, and Ethan. She stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around her like a hug. The living room was soft with the flicker of a holiday movie on the TV, its colors dancing across the worn couch where Lily and Ethan sprawled. Half asleep, Mike looked up from his armchair, his flannel shirt rumpled, his brown eyes searching her face. "Allie," he said, his voice low, laced with worry. "What happened?" Allison set her purse down, her throat tight. She crossed the room, sinking onto the couch beside her kids, who stirred at her presence. Lily, her freckled face soft with sleep, mumbled, "Mom, you're back early." Ethan, clutching his toy spaceship, sat up, his eyes wide. "Did Aunt Emily make you mad again?" The question, so innocent, broke something open in Allison. She laughed, a shaky sound that bordered on a sob, and pulled them both into a fierce hug. "Yeah, buddy," she whispered, her voice cracking, "but it's okay now." She looked at Mike, who'd risen from his chair, his brow furrowed. "I need to tell you everything," she said, her words heavy with the weight of what she'd done. They sat around the kitchen table, the kids tucked back into bed, a pot of coffee brewing as Allison recounted the night. Her voice trembled as she described Emily's insult, low class, not my level, and grew steady as she detailed her stand. The documents, the silence that had swallowed the room. Mike listened, his calloused hand resting on hers, his eyes darkening with anger when she quoted Emily's words, softening with pride as she described her defiance. "You really laid it all out there," he said, his voice thick with admiration. "God, Allie, I wish I'd seen her face." He squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You did what I've wanted to do for years. You stood up for us." Allison's lips trembled into a smile, but her eyes glistened. "I should have done it sooner. Mike, all that money, our savings, Lily's dance lessons, Ethan's summer camp, I let her take so much." Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, the guilt and grief crashing over her like a wave. Mike leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You did it for family. Allie, you thought you were helping. That's who you are. But tonight, you took yourself back. That's what matters." His words were a lifeline, pulling her from the undertow of regret. In the weeks that followed, Allison's phone buzzed with Emily's calls, first apologetic, then frantic, then silent. Voicemails piled up. "Allie, I didn't mean it. You know I love your family, and you humiliated me in front of everyone. How could you?" Allison listened to the first few, her heart twisting, but by the third, she deleted them unheard. She blocked Emily's number, the act as final as a door slamming shut. The sister who'd once been her confidant, her shadow, was gone, and Allison let her go. She redirected her energy to her family, reclaiming the pieces she'd given away. She took Lily to the North Carolina Museum of Art, watching her daughter's eyes light up at the vibrant canvases, promising herself they'd save for those dance lessons. She and Ethan built a model rocket in the backyard, laughing as it fizzled and sparked, his joy a balm to her wounds. One night, she and Mike sat on their back porch, sharing a bottle of cheap Merlot under a blanket of stars. "We're enough, aren't we?" she asked. Her voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. Mike turned to her, his eyes warm in the moonlight. More than enough, Allie, always have been. He kissed her, and for the first time in years, she believed it. Word of the Thanksgiving showdown spread, as Allison knew it would. Emily's boutique, already teetering, closed within a month, its windows dark, its Instagram account silent. Whispers of her ingratitude circulated among Charlotte's elite, her social circle shrinking like a flame starved of oxygen. Allison didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The truth had been her victory. Sharp and clean. By Christmas, Allison hosted a dinner in Raleigh, their small dining room bursting with mismatched chairs and the people who mattered most, Mike's parents, her best friend from work, the neighbors who'd become family. The table was modest, paper napkins, a turkey slightly overcooked, but the laughter was rich, the love palpable. Lily and Ethan helped serve pie, their faces glowing with pride. As they raised glasses in a toast, Mike's hand found hers under the table, his grip steady. To us, he whispered, his voice a vow, to taking it all back. Allison smiled, her heart full, the Christmas lights casting a warm glow across the room. Revenge hadn't just been about exposing Emily, it had been about reclaiming her worth. Her family, her life, in the soft clink of glasses and the chatter of her loved ones. She found something she hadn't felt in years, peace. The battle was over, and Allison had won, not just against Emily, but for herself. If you find the story interesting, please like and share this video and leave a comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos.